Hello, and thank you for tuning in to Morning Buzz. I'm Adam Eisen, Membership Director at the One Club for Creativity, and lucky for you this morning, your host. We had a blast last night partying with the newest class of young guns. If you notice the bags under my eyes, how dare you? They are work-related. But the party did not stop there. We are continuing the fun and celebrating our amazing global community of creatives. Yes, I said global. We'll kick things off with a panel of experts from Finland who will educate us with Greenwashing for Dummies. And then we'll meet a judge from the new jury panel of the TDC 69 competition who's had an exciting design career that just keeps getting more interesting. Before we kick things off, as always, please find that chat box, say hello, let us know where you're tuning in from, and maybe tell us your favorite font on theme. And definitely please drop your questions for our guests so that we can get them answered. With that said, I'd like to welcome to the screen our guests joining us all the way from Finland. So as they pointed out, this is more so their evening buzz. With their panel, Greenwashing for Dummies, How to Turn Purpose into Marketing, consultant of strategy and sustainability communications, Antti Isokangas, business journalist and consultant, Mellakka advisor, Jani Niipola, and chief executive officer of Hasan Partners, Riku Vassinen. Hey guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Oh, I think we're still muted.
Unmute. Yes.
There you go. We
got you. Now we're on.
Welcome.
Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone,
Yeah.
and good morning and good afternoon for us. And unfortunately, Jani couldn't be with us. He came down with flu and had to stay home. So it's just Riku and myself.
Yeah. But we are in Jani's workplace,
Yes,
so we
anyway,
stole the
They're-
studio.
it's there in
So
spirit.
thanks for Jani.
And thanks for the invitation.
And Joni. We have Joni who is helping with tech. Because in
Perfect.
Finland, we have shortage of names. So.
Well, perfect. Okay, cool. I'm going to give you guys the screen and I'll pop back on to help with some Q&A at the end. Can't wait to hear what you guys have to share.
Okay, here we go. Can you see?
Oh, yes. Okay, just a moment.
No.
We're
here we
on.
Go. Anyway, thanks once again for the invitation. We will be talking about our recently released book, which is only out in Finnish now. It's literally called Greenwashing Guide in Finnish, but the presentation is sort of slightly more understandable. Greenwashing for Dummies. So we don't have to, explain that the title of the book is meant to be sarcastic, and it's not literally a guide for greenwashing. I'm Antti Isokangas. I'm as Adam just introduced, a consultant for communications. I have a background in journalism as well, and Riku here.
Yeah, I'm CEO for Hasan Partners, the biggest independent agency in Finland, but recent returner to Finland. So last 10 years I was away, so 3 years in Nairobi and 7 years in Singapore. So I have to say that today when it was snowing, it was quite shock for me. And then we have Jani in spirit, yes, somewhere in here.
Yeah. As you can see in the illustration, he's the big guy in the middle. He couldn't be with us. Jani also works in corporate communications like myself. He also has a background in journalism. We just try to count all three of us put together. We have combined history of or experience of some 70 years in marketing, corporate communications, and media in this country. Well, Riku also outside of this country. Jani and myself have mostly been based in Finland.
Yeah, which either means we're very old or that we are very experienced.
We started very young.
Yeah, that's true as well. But yeah, so let's talk about the book. It's now only in elf language, but Finnish, great language to learn. Even Tolkien used it as an inspiration for Lord of the Rings, some of the weird languages there. But essentially, we started to write the book. It was more about brand purpose and almost like the avalanche of what brand purpose is. But because we are marketers, we wanted to give it a catchy name, and therefore it became Greenwashing Guide.
Yes, and the point was also to sort of make it very clear that we're being sarcastic, not only in the title but throughout the book. It's full of examples. We're not really telling, it's not a guide for anything. We're not telling anybody how to act, but we're making fun of brands that we don't like and who we think are just funny in many ways when they try to act more, just look like they're more sustainable or more woke than they actually are.
Yeah. Although, have you got any calls from companies wanting to greenwash?
Unfortunately, that's one of our biggest regrets. Is nobody's really been offended by it yet. Of course, Finland is a small country and the market is very small. And of course, we are looking to get the book published in other languages, and we're looking for agents. If anybody in the audience happens to be working in publishing and would be interested in, please drop us a note. We'd be happy to talk. About international rights.
Yeah, because of course our original version, because I hadn't been in Finland, all my examples were from abroad, and one of the things that publishing editor was saying that more Finnish examples. So we have one version which is more international examples, and that's yet to be published. So, but should we dig into it? So we talk about like 10 core tenets of the book, and but maybe we would tell a little bit about the illustration.
Yes, the illustrations, as you can see, are much better than the text. They're by a guy called Rami Niemi, Finnish guy now based in Sweden who works internationally. Well, Adam, just yesterday when we talked, he recognized his work from GQ magazine. I used to work with him in a Finnish men's magazine 15 years ago or so. And we possibly couldn't afford him now because he's so internationally successful, but he owed us one and agreed to do the illustrations. He's also done work for international brands, Nike and so on. But also the previous slide, or the one before that, the illustration about us was obviously by him as well. But we have 10 main points following very closely the structure of the book. Some of the more local stuff we left out, but we start with the main points. As everybody knows, people expect way more from brands than they used to only 5 or 10 years ago. And it's not only sort of purpose-driven brands you can see in the illustration, like IKEA or Starbucks or Ben & Jerry's or the Catholic Church, which we also go into in the book. It's pretty much every brand, and it's not just customers. People working in marketing, especially in consumer marketing, always think about it's always the customers who are driving the drive to sustainability or wokeness or corporate or brand activism. It's all stakeholders. It's not just the customers in the consumer area. It's also B2B customers. It's also people working in corporations. It's your own people as well, and it's also the society at large. It's lawmakers. It's regulators, and more importantly than anybody else, it's also the owners and the financiers. If you look at the financial markets, the ESG thing is getting out of hand, and all corporations, consumer brands included, are having to answer to that, which means everybody has lots of pressure on them to look more sustainable than they were just 15 minutes ago.
And I think that's the really important point, that customers or consumers are not actually the key driving force there, because according to some of the studies, only 80% of people actually know the values of the brands they are buying, which is not surprising. Not many of us even know the values of the company we are working for. But also because of the social media as well, it doesn't necessarily need that every consumer is responsible, because of different social media channels, and those consumers who are more awake can also talk about this topic and make it more broadly known. But of course, we are humans, and quite often in queries, we are appearing to be more responsible than we really are.
Everybody says that they want to buy sustainable brands, but they don't necessarily act the same way. So, but larger picture, it's not about how consumer markets are changing. It's about how capitalism, to be really pretentious about this, is changing. We've been living in the era of the shareholder value for 30 or 40 years now, ever since Thatcher and Reagan, and everybody has been taught that the only reason corporations exist is to make money for their owners and their shareholders. But that is being slowly changed, and actually even big companies like BlackRock are driving this. If you listen to Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock, he's been talking about how corporations need a license to exist from all of their stakeholders, the society at large. Communist magazines and newspapers like Financial Times are calling for a reset of capitalism, which is also reflected in the way corporations obviously act.
Yeah, and in many ways, this is actually back to something that companies have done in the past, because actually this Friedman idea of that your only responsibility is shareholders and nothing else, it's from 70s. But companies have been around for much longer, and we actually talk about it. And I think that's one of the important, and with the book, it's quite important. We're balancing of the thing of the responsibility, but also we have the viewpoint that it is also responsible to make profits and employ people and those things. So and if we think about companies of the past, they were very important actors in their communities, also because there wasn't the safety nets, especially in Finland, which is nowadays has very wide safety net, maybe too wide if you ask me. But overall, that's something which is like the Friedman view of the world is quite new in grand scheme.
Well, in the grand scheme of things. And of course, the era of stakeholder value doesn't mean that companies shouldn't make a profit. It just means that owners and the financiers are only one of the stakeholders, not the only one to take into account. But of course, we're all communicators, we're all marketers, and of course, we do need to take a look in the mirror and just realize the fact that we're also responsible for all of this. Since companies and brands are under such pressure to appear more sustainable, more woke than they actually are, it's usually the communicators, it's usually the marketers who are actually in charge of the greenwashing or the pink washing or the rainbow washing or the brown washing or the white washing or any of these wash programs available these days. And it's us who come up with all the exaggerated things. If you define greenwashing, it's about a brand trying to appear more sustainable than it is, or talking around the actual subject, or just giving a wrong impression about how it's acting. Same thing, of course, applies to the picture refers to Pride Month. Is corporations are always friends of the minority communities for 1 month a year, but that doesn't mean that they're actually minority friendly for 11 months of the year.
Yeah, or it might be that you're waving the rainbow flag in lots of countries but not in Saudi Arabia.
Exactly. Or sponsoring the Qatar World Cup, which is just a criminal country in many ways.
Yeah, and in quite often greenwashing, I think sometimes it's driven also that there's some sort of guilt in our industry of that we are essentially we help to sell stuff. Exactly. That's exactly what we are doing, and therefore that is happening. But also I think with greenwashing, what is quite interesting, and when we were doing the book, was that lots of it is that you're diverting the attention. Like one of the examples of that is Shein, the fast fashion company from China, which some of you might have ordered the $2 shirts. But they have actually put body positivity as one of their key things they're talking about in UK, which is a good thing and applaudable, and they have gotten good press about it. But of course, that's not really the challenge, the key issue with Shein. It's about that it's actually encouraging you to overconsume and do all of those things. And because $2 shirt,
it's anything but sustainable.
Yeah.
Anyway, what Shane is doing is they're doing it on purpose, but in many cases, the greenwashing is sort of happens because of ignorance. To be honest, so many marketers are actually very their knowledge of the sustainability issues is very shallow, and many times the claims made by brands in their marketing or their corporate communications is based on just ignorance, not understanding the issues deeply enough. But even when it's sort of innocent, of course, marketing is all about brands trying to appear as the best version of themselves, but greenwashing is not innocent or harmless even when it's innocent, when it's not done on purpose, because it also always gives consumers sort of a false sense of having done enough, and it gives the companies and the brands a false sense of having done enough, whereas we know that look at the pace, say the climate change is happening. It means that we have to be running faster every time, all the time, just to stay at same place, let alone actually turning the thing around. So it's not harmless. Also, this country luckily doesn't have very many climate change deniers like yours does. But also, whenever a company or a brand gets caught, for false advertising or false climate claims, it always gives ammunition to the wrong people, the people who are trying to make it look like climate change or the loss of biodiversity is just something marketers came up with.
Yeah, and I think that's that we see right now with the compensation. There has been at least in this in Europe, lots of talk about like how many of the compensation schemes have been carbon
offsets.
Offset things have been actually fraudulent or those things. But I think overall it's a good thing, and one part of that. Also, another interesting thing is for many companies, it's good to turn the focus to consumer. And we talk in the book about how personal carbon footprint was not invented by Greenpeace or any NGO.
Or Greta Thunberg, the Swedish activist lady.
Yeah, it was invented by BP, one of the biggest oil companies in the world. But shall we move on?
Yes, we should.
And for me, actually, to shift the pace, for me, one of the key reasons why I wanted to wrote this book was very selfish reason, and that was I was seeing all these ads, and they were horrible. They were and they tried to appear like many of the brands tried to appear better than they used to be. And actually, in 90s, 31% of people believe that ads are as good as TV shows. On 2016, that number had plummeted to 14%. And it's not because the TV shows are better. There wasn't Temptation Island back then. Actually, there wasn't even reality TV back then. So I think
could be that TV shows are better, because they are.
But the hype in that sense, like the hypocrisy, and same way the ads have forgotten, because I think good ad is about like you find something interesting in the product or the audience and connect and talk it interestingly. That you have minus 20% of plastic and you're saving the world and you are the new Jesus Christ. That doesn't just fit it. So I wanted to write this book also to make us focus on doing good ads, and again, and not doing like a purpose washing and just putting like responsibility cannot be like magic dust you are putting on top of the campaign or things like that you're doing. Yeah. Which to me brings to the point of that the era of hero brand is over. Like it's you need to put the consumers on pedestal. And actually the reality, like if you think about like mechanic in advertising, which is used very little is that advertiser makes fun of the setting they are, that we are in this advertisement universe where it's sort of false, or at least it's a little bit like someone's Tinder profile. So there's a resemblance of reality, but quite far leap. But if you actually make irony about that, that always works because people know that it's a game as well. And I think in that sense that you are putting like, we are saving the world because we're maybe we're maybe doing carbon offset, or we're planting trees, but actually we don't know how to plant trees or things like that. The era of that, putting the brand to the pedestal and thinking that brands would be the savior, that's over.
Also, one reason why making just pretentious claims about your responsibility or your wokeness just doesn't work is because you have people working inside the company, and what used to stay within the company doesn't really stay in the company anymore, just because of social media and just because of digital communications. Internal communications in corporations these days equals external communications. Anything happening, anything taking place within the company always gets out, no matter how hard the companies try to keep it inside. And that's one reason why you have to be very careful about the claims you make, because the people working there know what really happens there when nobody's watching.
Yeah, and I think the important thing always to remember is that and we talk about in the book about Colin Kaepernick case, but quite often I think that and the story why Colin Kaepernick was Nike's in Nike's ad, and it was of course a great ad, but quite often misunderstood. It wasn't something that Nike jumped to Black Lives Matter bandwagon or something. It was they were doing something that they have always done, standing by their athletes, and therefore we have this one of the great footballers who cannot do what he's best at because of his beliefs, and therefore Nike had the decision to make what to do, and they made the ad, and that's purpose in practice. But it's not about like, okay, we are now putting the purpose to pedestal, or we are appearing to be woke. It's about being true to what Nike really is, and that is standing by your athletes. Because when Tiger Woods had smoked marijuana and took a little bit of sleeping pills and some whatnot and crashed into a tree, all the other sponsors left him except Nike, because Nike stands by the athletes there. When we interviewed Rob Campbell to the book, he was saying that Nike athlete is quite often like they have chinks in their armor. There is something there, and but
he also said that Bill Clinton could be a Nike athlete, but Obama couldn't.
Yeah, that's also one quote. But the interesting point in there, like this caused, like Kaepernick in that caused a wide uproar, but it was from the people who are not actually core Nike buyers as well, and that's something we quite often forget when we are marketing, that if you upset people who are not buying you, then that's actually good. It's a fame for you. And right now also boycotting is relatively easy in that sense. We have been able to do like a soft boycotting right now with Russian products, because there is no Russian brand.
It's very exactly, but name a Russian brand apart from Tetris.
Yeah.
And that came out was 35 years ago. So
so in that sense, but it would be hard to boycott products from China, from example, right now.
Well, it would be difficult if you had to include products manufactured in China, like these laptops here. But anyway, corporate activism or brand activism, the same way Nike does it, or many big American or international brands do is sort of interesting. Living in a small country, Finland only has 5.5 million people in the whole country, and that makes it very, very difficult for corporations or brands to be activists because they cannot afford to turn their backs on anybody. I can understand how it's easy for Patagonia to be the woke brand and sort of turn their backs to Republicans, but it just wouldn't work for a small Finnish brand catering to a Finnish audience because the market is simply too small for it. But back to international relations, I don't know if any of you is familiar with the term Finlandization, but that refers to the Cold War. After Finland fought Soviets in World War II, actually in 2 separate wars, and lost, Finland had to stay neutral for the next 50 years, mostly for because we were scared of antagonizing Russia, and that became known as Finlandization. When a small country bends over backwards to please a bigger, more powerful one. Finland stayed democratic and Western, but had to be very neutral about Russia.
Yeah.
And the same thing is now happening with China and international brands.
Yeah, Finlandizing is our claim to fame, international fame. That and Nokia, we know what happened there, and now maybe Lauri Markkanen a little bit, but yeah, it's interesting, and I think this showcases the double standards there. Like Apple does a big campaigns around privacy in Western markets. But of course, in China, they give the data to Chinese official. The customer data is in Chinese government server. So there is always like this, and same thing like now the football World Cup is in Qatar. Because of what I have noticed right now in Finland, because of course we cannot do trade anymore with Russia. Actually, Finland has turned the focus to Middle East, and it's not like you're changing you're changing from one dictatorship to another. So these are like interesting, and these are challenging. Like if you want to be a truly global brand, can you ignore the biggest market and the biggest manufacturing hub? And it's not always easy, and that's, I think, the big revelation in some ways in our book. It would be great if we could say like, okay, this is how you be responsible. This is what you need to do as a company. But there's lots of gray areas as well, and it's not always easy.
Yeah. Well, coming back to internal things, we've talked about how internal communications is just as important as external communications and marketing, and that's because especially the younger workforce, people under the age of 35 or so, are much more value driven than any other previous generation. And if you interview anybody under 30 these days for a job, they usually ask way more questions than you ever get to ask them. So employer branding is becoming increasingly important for many companies, especially now with the Great Resignation going on, and many fields experience a terrible labor shortage, which means many of these things we've talked about, sustainability, social responsibility, and so on, that used to be thought of as just external marketing things, are factors in employer branding, and that has to be taken into account when you come up with the messaging as well. Which brings us to our last point.
You
may have noticed that there's been a global pandemic on for more than 2.5 years.
I was hoping that the worst outcome of the pandemic at the end of the day would have been that Crocs became fashionable again, but of course it's I think and there has been like lots of shifts, like, because actually when we were writing this book, it was just going to a print. The Ukraine war started, and then we are actually scrambling to find some viewpoint, like what brands should do and all of that. But I don't know, like, will the pandemic change quite a lot? I think it has become quite a big issue. For example, like the remote working, non-remote working, all of that. What role brands can play, and actually, based on all the studies right now, it seems that brands still play a role. Even when there's like first global pandemic, now we are in the words of world war. And actually, what is found that people look for reassurance from brands, and actually brands and known brands can bring safety as well. So that's something to remember as well if you work with brands.
It's not just the pandemic, it's also the war in Europe, in Ukraine. I don't know how much affects sentiments in the US, but it certainly does here. Just take a look at the map, and we share a 900-mile border with Russia. So obviously, it scares the bejesus out of Finns. Also, inflation and the looming recession, which means that everybody's sort of restless. And of course, part of that is how brands act, but it's the main thing is that nobody knows what's going to happen. So it's all about the relationship between not only consumers and brands, but also the relationship between workers and corporations is rapidly changing. And all of that, of course, affects how you market, how you do corporate communications, the messages you put out in so many ways. It's very much, question of trust. People used to trust their employers, not so much anymore. People used to trust brands, not so much anymore. So
people used to trust governments.
Well,
in
in the US they certainly don't, but it's coming down here as well. So many things are changing, and there's another book to be written about that, hopefully in the near future.
Yeah, and interesting, like what we all should fight for right now is that, because we're heading in the recession, probably in Europe the worst recession than in US, but essentially the happy times are over in many ways. The worrying part might be that suddenly there is these discussions of, hey, this climate change, maybe we should park it for a while and just focus on our core business, like sustainability. It was nice for a while, but maybe let's run price promotions.
It depends. Of course, there are also factors that are speeding up the green transition. Of course, especially in Europe, trying to get rid of Russian oil, Russian gas means that things like the move towards solar, to move towards wind power is picking up speed just because of the political situation. But of course, once again, nobody knows what's going to happen.
Yeah, and I mean that might be the only good part of if there's any a good part of war. But I think because we're so driven by these quarterly targets and all of that, it might make companies and even us as human beings do short-sighted decisions, and that we should do, because climate change, we have lots of challenges we should tackle. But I believe that we as a humankind can solve them, because we are very good in putting ourselves in problems, but at least historically we have gotten out of those problems as well.
Well, some of them quicker than others, but 3 takeaways. Of course, sustainability is no longer a magic bullet for marketing. It's very difficult to come up with sustainability-driven marketing messages since everybody's doing it. It's becoming a license to operate level thing. But at the same time, greenwashing no longer works either, since consumers, the society at large, is much more cynical, much more knowledgeable about those things, and people can detect greenwashing much easier than they used to, especially after they have read our book.
Which is nice experience if you don't know Finnish.
There's also an audiobook available.
Yeah, in Finnish as well, so you can also listen and don't understand. But
and the third point, once again, like all marketing, it's all about customers, but it's not only about them. It's we're moving towards towards stakeholder capitalism, it means you have to think more about your co-workers, your employees as well.
And that's it from us.
Okay, Jani says hi too.
Yes.
That's awesome. Thank you all so much. That was really great. And we do have some questions coming in from our audience, so I want to make sure we get to those. The first one actually piggybacks off of your last point quite well. Does what the customers demand ever conflict with broader audiences? And how do you navigate that, if so?
That's a good one. Riku, you want to take this one?
So broader audience, yeah, I mean, yeah, well, yeah, I mean, we talk in the book about this brand called Vertica, which is sort of like anti-Patagonia. So they're not sustainable. The guy is actually wreaking havoc in national parks and essentially very not likable fellow and not a brand I would buy myself. But maybe their customers have. So actually, I mean, I'm not saying, I'm not advocating it, but it might be that there is audiences that some brands can gather and find, and which is against.
But it's like any niche brand. You know, a good example is in popular culture in general. If you look at, say, bands that you love to hate, they have a small fan base which is large enough to sustain them, but everybody else hates them. And that's basically the same thing that happens with niche brands sometimes.
Sure.
Well, like Vertica is a good example, but you know, I'm sure we could come up with other examples if you give us a bit more time.
Yeah,
absolutely. In a world with increasing communications and information access, there are so many issues that come with a social expectation to make your position clear. How do you recommend that brands navigate this while remaining authentic? And is there a line where the brand is more focused on social dialogue over just delivering the product or service that they're known for?
Yeah, that's why brands should have a clearly communicated purpose, because that helps them navigate between, because you know they couldn't possibly be for one thing one week and for another next week. And that's why you need to have, of course, it comes down from corporate strategy, starts with the upper management, but of course it depends on how big a brand we're talking about here. If it's something local and small, it's much easier to navigate those things, whereas if it's global, where the demands are very, very different.
Yeah, and I have to say about the purpose, like sometimes the whole brand is built on purpose, and it's quite easy to do communications around. Like we Hasan Partners, we work with Neste, which is the biggest biofuel producer in the world. Like it's quite easy to make the story. But then if you think about, you have a candy brand, it's not sustainable. Like it's you're selling sugar. Like if you're sugar and fat. If you say that your purpose is to encourage diversity or something, like in that sense, with some brands, it's the purpose might be just like it's fun and don't eat too much. But
it's like when Pepsi came up with that campaign about them, social issues a few years back, it just fell flat because it wasn't believable, because the brand in itself has absolutely nothing to do with that.
Yeah, but have you ever tried to give Pepsi to rioter and police? And
to be honest, I have not. But I should try next time I'm at a riot.
That's actually kind of I guess it answers our next question, which today there is this pressure to be built on purpose. Do you say it's vital if someone's out starting a brand now that they need to build on a bigger purpose than the product?
Of course, it depends on what kind of a market you're in. If you're selling, say, milk, everybody understands what milk is for, and it's not very believable if it's all about social justice or something because it comes from cows. But if you come up with a oat-based alternative, say Oatly, which has been very big on their purpose, and they have communicated it very cleverly. So it depends on what kind of a market you're in.
Yeah, and but to me, Oatly is a good example in that sense, because you could also make the argument that Oatly is successful because they are doing all the things right in the marketing playbook. You choose a bigger opponent, which is the dairy in general. Yeah, the big milk. You use really copy. You have very recognizable brand assets and all of that. But so in that sense, and I think when it's a startup, all the successful startups have shared purpose within the team. It's not always like purpose doesn't always make the world a better place, because I think Facebook, like, and when you read the Chaos Monkeys, which is a very entertaining book, but it's very clear that there's a shared sense of purpose, but it's not about saving the world in that
and
sense.
I may have my facts wrong here, but as far as I remember, actually, very few people remember about Oatly as much as we like the brand and their marketing. One of their main owners was a private equity backed by the Chinese government, which also it's all about brand purpose. I understand they actually showed their shares in that, but still. There are, even the companies or even the brands that look the most sustainable, most woke, very often are not.
Right. So interesting. You really have to do your research and figure out what's going on behind the scenes.
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, we are approaching our time. I do want to point out we had a chat come in from Thilo. Thilo, if you he has a publishing contact in Germany he would like to connect you with potentially.
Oh, wonderful.
So Thilo, if you'll shoot us a message on the contact page, I can put you in touch with these folks and see what we can make happen for them.
Thanks.
Yeah, see, look, making connections. Well, thank you to both for being here today. It's been awesome to get your global perspective and expertise. And I also want to thank our friends at Wunderman Thompson, Finland, who made this possible. But thank you both for being here and sharing with us today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Have a great evening, and give Jani our well wishes.
We will.
All right. Alrighty, as you likely know by now, the One Club for Creativity is a growing community, and anyone in the advertising and design industries. Most recently, that has officially come to include the Type community, as we have joined forces with the legendary Type Directors Club. The TDC has just kicked off their 69th competition, and I'm so excited to introduce to you one of their incredibly talented judges, Lynda Lucas. Lynda is a design lead, maker, thinker, educator, and artist based in Brooklyn, New York City. She loves meaning, beauty, craft, and changing. Love that. Her past lives have included head of visual design for Frog New York, adjunct professor of typography at Parsons Communication Design, design leadership at Condé Nast, Chronicle Books, and is the founder and editor of La Motorcyclette, I apologize, a magazine about women motorcycle riders. Her work has been exhibited at the Museum Contemporary of Art in LA, at AIGA National Design Center. She's Webby nominated and awarded Women of Graphic Design and so much more. So please welcome to the show, Lynda Lucas. Hi, Lynda, how are you?
Hello, everybody. So wonderful to be here.
Thank you for joining. You have such a varied history when it comes to design experience. What have been some of the highlights, and what has guided you as you navigate your career?
Thanks for that. That's a great question. I would say that life is short and design is big. I personally love my hybrid experience, sort of like the meandering path that I have taken in my career. I really think that design disciplines are merging more and more these days, and I'm totally here for it. I think it sort of started as counterintuitive as it may seem. I was really influenced by my time at DAP, which is design school, the same one that Michael Beirut went to. And it's very rooted in sort of classic Bauhausian graphic design curriculum. And we did a lot of projects by hand. We learned how to be better than the computer as a tool. I think that's really allowed me to take to heart sort of the ethos that design is a process and an experience. And it's sort of this like way of thinking and doing, a magical journey sometimes. Very, very Vignelli. You can design everything. Design is culture. And I think that I'm, happiest making things that feel like they're part of a cultural conversation, kind of somewhere in between poetry and science. A couple highlights. I'm a little bit older than I look. And, one of my highlights is still designing and art directing an illustrated book called Farts Around the World with Lisa Hannawalt, 11 years ago. It has sound. It's amazing.
Oh my gosh.
On the other end of the spectrum,
I'm gonna look that up.
yeah, it's incredible. There's a video of it. You should watch it.
Yes.
On the other end of the spectrum is getting to work with Nicholas Bleckman, who's creative director for The New Yorker, on the digital representation, the website of, the storied icon, The New Yorker. It's a publication that's really well known for its typographic branding, which has been consistent since 1925. That's almost 100 years old.
Yeah.
And then also, of course, anytime I get to work with AI interactions, experiences, super fascinated, obsessed.
Yeah, quite the gamut.
Yeah.
With so much, I wanted to also pause and take some time to address your pursuit of personal projects, because you have such cool ones under your belt. La Motocyclette looks amazing. How did it come about?
Yeah, that's a good one. Years ago, I was one half of an indie publishing art collab with another designer. Her name's Courtney Cassidy. And our name together was Cool. I'm Lynda Lucas, CCOOLL. And we just put out tons and tons of zines. We showed in the New York Art Book Fair, the LA Art Book Fair. And at the time, I was really getting into motorcycle riding. And, I just didn't know a whole lot of women riders. It still tends to be a very male-dominated sport. And I decided to make a zine about women riders, sort of like a love letter to this thing that I was really passionate about. But I wanted to do it really differently. Motorcycle aesthetic then, and in some ways now, still is like distress type, flames, like Guy Fieri.
Skulls and snakes.
Yeah, exactly. And I wanted to elevate it and make it something really pure and clean, like 1960s classic, sort of like this beautiful, artful coffee table book that was really outside of the common trope or aesthetic. And, the first edition was just a few friends that I knew, and I made the design black and white because I was broke, but it was beautiful. And it really took off. It was really a cultural moment in time in where the women's community was growing, and there was just nothing else out there like La Moto. And soon we were getting submissions from all around the world. Women would write to us saying, reading the interviews really inspired them to learn how to ride.
Wow.
And that's such a heart project, like to be making something that feels that makes people feel connected in this like very tangible analog way where they're finding community. And to have your design make people feel a little bit braver, like that's really beautiful,
Yeah, for sure. Do you keep a motorcycle in Brooklyn?
I do.
Cool.
I pay for a garage space, sadly.
Hey, it brings you joy, so it's worth it.
Absolutely.
With so much variety under your belt, I'm curious as to what types of projects or experience give you the most joy or creative fuel.
Yeah, I think it's hard to beat La Moto for joy or creative fuel. I think, though, that the ethos there is pushing yourself and trying to make something new every time, not getting stuck in a rut, not being a one-hit wonder. Like sort of pushing yourself to the brink of that cliff, where there's, uncertainty and like the murky gray, and you're a little bit like, I have no idea what I'm doing. There's a certain slightly masochistic adrenaline junkie thrill in that, that I think is very addictive. So I think it gives me a lot of creative joy and fuel to push myself and to try new things and to learn new avenues of design. And I feel like that sort of philosophy is a really great umbrella for how to be open and curious and learning always. I also get a lot of joy and creative fuel through teaching and also managing designers in their careers. It helps me see things from a new perspective. It helps me be a better communicator. There's in teaching and also in managing, there's so many different ways of learning styles, communicating. Some people are verbal, some people are audio, can learn through audio, some people are visual, and you have to be able to communicate in all of the different methods many times over and over. And I think it really gives you a new perspective, nurturing that growth and that curiosity in other people is very satisfying.
Is there anything in the like murky gray in front of you or avenues of design that you're hoping to get your hands on sometime in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I've done more, this is a little bit hard to articulate, but I've done more digital projects in my 15-ish year career that I can count, different varieties, physical projects too. And I still think that we are just very much the beginning of something that my shorthand for it is integrated design, which is like basically experiences that exist in 2D and 3D, physical and digital, experiences that merge all five senses, architecture, digital, things like that. Right now, those experiences to me feel very shallow and sort of piecemeal. I think we've just started scratching the surface of what an integrated, holistic design practice and experience looks like. And then to build on that a little bit, I would love to work on projects that feel like they're in the synesthesia world, blending something super pure and sensorial like scent or design or perfume design with lettering. Like, what does a typeface smell like? That would be fascinating.
That's so cool. Well, and on type, congratulations on being selected as a TDC judge. How would you describe your connection to type?
I would say that typography has been the backbone and the thread in my whole very hybrid sort of meandering design journey. I mean, like, type is really everything. You don't really need anything else. I've been very much a type nerd since design school. I did my capstone thesis on something called entoptic forms, which are these scientifically documented, observable geometric forms that are visible when your eyes are closed, and when you're dreaming in altered states of consciousness, and tracing those back to the evolution of the earliest alphabets. And, how the way that we communicate in written form is so tied to something as basic as our human biology is really beautiful stuff. I really feel that typography is this hidden language that influences us, that educates us, that protects us, that persuades us. It's both history and culture. And I've taught sophomores at Parsons for several years, one of their very first type classes. That absolute basics. And it's been such a privilege to teach them and to get to see them learn and start to be able to understand and wield that hidden language. Also really amusing to have their eyes be open to all the hideous typography in the world.
So much.
A lot.
Yeah. It's everywhere. Type is everywhere, and bad type is specifically everywhere.
It's so true.
Is there anything that you're particularly looking forward to in the judging process of the upcoming competition?
Yeah, being inspired, seeing things that I've never seen before, that's always something. It's just increasingly getting harder to find. And, there's so many pros about living in the hyper-connected age, but a con is that, there's sort of this homogenization of design aesthetic. And I'm really excited to see the diversity of the work, as I anticipate there will be a lot of. And then, of course, getting blown away and by the other judges, getting to work with them. I'm really stoked about that. And then also, something rather momentous is that the category that I'm judging is lettering, which is a brand new category as of this year. And so getting to define that, like, what does good look like there? It's such an expressive category, and it's pretty wide open. And so I'm really excited and looking forward to that.
That's awesome. You will set the bar for the legacy of that category. So cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, that just about brings us to our time. Lynda, it's been so great to meet you. And thank you so much for being here and for lending your talents to our jury.
Thank you so much for having me, Adam. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too.
If you're a typographer or have an exciting type project of any kind, we hope that you also will join this year's competition. I've included a link down below for entries, which are open now, and we are just ahead of the early bird deadline. So make sure to scroll down, check it out, see what categories you should submit to, and I wish you the very best of luck with that. And that just about wraps up our program for today. Try not to miss me, but I'll see you in 3 weeks' time on December 8th with our friends at Gale with the Avengers theory of collaboration. Have a very happy Thanksgiving, and I will see you then.
It's the same way, but it never happens the same.